Okay, I'm going to ask 3 quick questions, and we'll open up to the group. Before our get-together here, you shared a story about walking the field with somebody. Would you mind sharing that with the group?
Well, I'll tell you what, Dennis, if you would be so kind, just the one from that, yeah, that one in your right hand. Just hand it to the audience. What happened is the greatest moment that ever happened in my baseball career had nothing to do with a win-loss. I never saw a player hit 4 home runs in a game, but I've seen 3. I've had the World Series. I've been on that winning flight home when you party like crazy. I mean, all of the great things. I've been to the White House to see the president after a World Series win. I've been in the I've actually been in the parade, believe it or not. They put broadcasters in there, and you're waving like you're a player, like you did something. Yeah, right. You did nothing, Hagin. Oh, but you just talked about it, which is true. But they also gave you a World Series ring. I've been able to fly with the Blue Angels, 45 minutes of sheer terror and excitement. I've had so many wonderful moments because of the game of baseball, but my greatest moment ever is something I'm sharing with you, is a baseball bat given to me by a dear friend of mine at San Diego State University. Because of the story of 9/11 and the time, back in 2001, we were on the road when that happened, the Rockies. We were in Arizona to play the Diamondbacks, and then we were going to finish the road trip in San Diego. We didn't play those games until the season ended, and they extended it a week. So instead of Tony Gwynn playing his last major league game in San Francisco, the script changed, and I had a chance to watch it and call it his last major league game. A dear friend in 2001, and he gave me that bat that day. And what Brian would like me to share with you is that it was 5 hours before the game. There was nobody there except Tony and myself. And he got up. He had a tank top on, shorts, and sandals. And at that time, if you remember Tony Gwynn, a little out of shape. Might be a little bit more like a Babe Ruth look. And he put on this straw hat, and he goes, well, I'm going to go take my final walk. So I ask of you, if there's a sports hero that you've had somewhere along the line, can you imagine that person saying to you, would you like to go on the walk with me? And that's what happened that day. I went to right field, center field, left field, third base, home plate, 2 hours, just listened. My wife wouldn't agree with that. You never listen. But anyway, I listened to his whole story, and it was a wonderful experience. So I'm sharing that bat with you because that's what he gave me that day. It was a very special day.
Do you believe that big salaries are helping or hurting sports?
Well, as long as advertisers and networks continue to pay the big money to have it on television in particular, I think it will continue. There are certain things that I disagree with. I went through many strikes. My very first year, I came to the Oakland Coliseum. They said, we're not playing today. I go, what do you mean we're not playing? Did I have the schedule wrong? No, we're on strike. 50 games lost. Then 1994 was another strike. Of course, we didn't have a World Series. So when they finally agreed, what I think every owner should do is abide by it. And not all of them have abided by that. And I think you need to. You need to abide by it, follow the rules. Everybody wins in that particular situation.
What's the best game that you've ever covered, and why?
Well, I've called 5 no-hitters, and that's pretty exciting because every pitch means something. I would have to say the first game for the Colorado Rockies, because there were 80,227 people in Mile High Stadium. Mark McIntosh, who at the time was with Channel 4, could you stand up, Mark? A dear friend, great guy who wanted to come tonight, and I appreciate that. Terrific individual. You remember the emotion. It was amazing to have that many people. And again, to not even know who Eric Young was, and he hits this home run, crazy. By the way, Rockies never had a shutout at home that entire season. Yet they took an 11-0 lead to the 9th inning of that game. Just to give you an idea, they never had one the entire year, but that first game they almost did. They won 11-4.
Right. So before I open it up to everyone for questions, so Mark, McIntosh, we just met. I was hiking in Vail a couple of weekends ago, and we're getting up to the top of the mountain, and we've got our hands on our legs like this because we're out of breath and out of shape. And this guy just goes right past us, and he has this Bad Daddy's Burger backpack. I was like, who has a Bad Daddy's Burger backpack? That must be a cool guy. So we struck up a conversation, and he helped lead us to the top of the mountain. And since then, we've had great conversation. And just funny how you meet people in life just by saying hello. And next time, if you'd bring a bottle of water for me, I'd appreciate it. Just saying, because I'm a little out of shape. But anyway, so let's open it up to the crowd. What questions do we have? Yes, back here. What is your favorite sport other than baseball?
Good question. I would have to say football. I love football. And Mark might remember this. In 1998, when the Broncos went back-to-back and won the Super Bowls, beating Green Bay the first time, then Atlanta, I'll never forget a line that I heard that particular night where they said, when they beat the Falcons, remember Dan Reeves as the coach? It's the first game plan he ever came up with so the Broncos would win. He was the opposing coach. But anyway, we digress. That same year, I want to tell you how I found out John Elway was going to retire. I don't know how you found out, but I was doing a speaking engagement similar to the duties that Brian conducts tonight, and I was going to introduce him, but this is well before the event. We're talking, and I said, gosh, I'm hearing rumors that you might be quitting. And he looked me straight in the eye and says, I am. I said, why? You got Terrell Davis, man. You got Rod Smith. You got Shannon Sharp. You got it all. He goes, since I was a little kid, I have been tackled, whether I saw him coming or not. And every time since I was a little kid until my professional ranks, playing with the Broncos, I could tell my body to move that football. 2 weeks ago, I broke a rib. I'm done. And I was so shocked, and he followed through. That was his reason for retiring, because he couldn't tell the body to move the football. I said, wow, he went out the right way.
Yeah. Oh, true. Next. Yes. Question is, can you share a story about a moment on the bus ride that was very inspirational or life-changing in some way?
I do remember when Brett Saberhagen was signed as a free agent on July 31st of the 1995 season. And the Rockies won the first ever wild card that year. And at 39,000 feet, 25 players going crazy. They were so excited because they felt they had been fortified. What we got was a mixture of goods that weren't just as good as they used to be with Kansas City. So that happened. I do remember the euphoria of that. But I do remember when the Cardinals won the World Series. And I remember it was a simple thing that they had never done all year. In football, you play 16 games. Baseball, 162. So it's very unusual when a team, and it was a team of veterans, they turned it on. They were very average. They were 83 and 79 that year, which is pretty close to average. But the first playoff game they played against San Diego, I'll never forget, Jim Edmonds, who wasn't an outspoken guy, but he said, I'm going to do a team ball like they do in football. And he did a team ball. And for some weird reason, something clicked with that team. And as average as they were, they turned it on and played like the New York Yankees of 1927 and won the World Series. So I think there's some, it's childish, it's juvenile at times, and it could also go the other way. But in that sense, it was a very positive thing. Yeah. So, and there were a lot of parties at 39,000 feet back in the day.
Okay, next question, Nicole.
Do you have a player that you might predict, it's not obvious to everyone, that you think is going to just rise to the top, but hasn't, and if so, do you have a way of is there a way of predicting, as many years as you've been in this industry, having somebody just because of their will and their dedication?
So the question is there a relatively unknown player right now that you think has the potential to really rise to the top? And is there some type of mechanism or something that you use to predict that for others? Great.
Well, I would have said Aaron Judge, but it wouldn't have been fair. The New York Yankees, my goodness, the guy's a rookie and does what he does at the All-Star game was ridiculous. I think I could have said that answer to the question a couple of years ago about Nolan Arenado, simply because not his offense, but his defense. The guy comes to play on both sides, and that's awesome. I will say this, though. The one guy that has surpassed everything that I expected of him, and I had high expectations, is Albert Pujols. I'll tell you why. Go back to June of 1999, draft day. It's the biggest moment in a young man's life. It truly is. And he had a girlfriend, and he was going to be married on New Year's Day the following January. So she comes to his apartment just outside Kansas City to congratulate him because she knows the draft is happening and he's going to be drafted. He was promised by Tampa that he was going to be a #1 pick. When she got there, he didn't answer the door. So she had a key. She opened the door, walked in. She found Albert Pujols, who just hit his 600th home run. Very few have ever hit 600 home runs. He was crying with his face head down in the pillow. I hate baseball. I quit. And she said, and this is the best thing to remember because I've got a wife like this. She goes, oh, so you're telling me we're going to get married on January 1st and you're going to be a powder and a baby now? She goes, give it 1 year. And if you do not make it to the major leagues, if you don't like baseball anymore, she really gave it to him. You have to know her to love her. She's an amazing woman. She basically told her husband-to-be, get it in gear, prove Major League Baseball wrong, tell the Cardinals that they were wrong, that they selected you in the 13th round, which means 400 players were selected before him. And here's a guy who thought he was the greatest player in the world, and yet Major League Baseball slapped him in the face. Well, he gave it 1.5 years. Made it to the major leagues, was Rookie of the Year. He's won the MVP. He's won a couple of World Series, over 600 home runs. Let me just suffice to say that Albert Pujols, in his first 7 years of baseball, with the eternal chip on his shoulder, did better numbers than Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Willie Mays, any of them. He's on his way to the Hall of Fame, and he can thank one person. He can thank his wife, because he was willing to quit that day. So what I've learned, Brian, is that somebody has a chip on his shoulder. If you have a young kid, teenage kid, whatever it is, the easiest way to get rid of a chip on the shoulder is a pat on the back.
You're giving me more golden nuggets, and I don't have my pen. I can't write all these down. Let's finish up with 2 questions. You had a question.
So you mentioned all of these games in a season. There's a lot. Day in and day out, perhaps it's a different game. How do you fuel that stamina through all those seasons with a lot of games?
Given the amount of games and all the practices and everything, how do you maintain the stamina for what you do, or maybe what the players even do?
It's a great question. As a broadcaster, I can only answer for me. It's a routine every day. Every now and then, I'd switch it up. If I arrived at the ballpark an hour later than 3 o'clock, if I got there at 4, sometimes 4:30, I felt like I went on vacation because it's an everyday process. For the players, that's why they have select days off. I think it's important. I think it's especially important here at altitude. You know, I talked to Buddy Black about that. I said, you know, and I don't know Jan, who for many years pitched batting practice for the Rockies. He's given up more home runs than anybody in this room. But But I think he'd agree with me that there's something to the altitude. I remember re-entry for me coming back from a West Coast road trip. Man, I could feel it. It just didn't feel tip-top. And, you know, I'm a native, but I felt it. And I wonder what happens to these players at times. And I sometimes wonder if, see, the players get there too early. Would you agree? They get there now at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're at 2 o'clock, you're late. And it's peer pressure. But the reality is, I think they should show up at 5 o'clock after a road trip and no batting practice. Because every day it's like, I remember Jim Leland, 1 year he spent as the manager of the Rockies. You know what he said? The team is a professional hitting team at batting practice, can't do a damn thing during the game. That's what he said. Am I right? He goes, I don't get it, but I think there's a fatigue factor. So as a broadcaster, what I would do, we're out of it 20 games by June 15th. What I did was every day I prepared like it was the game of the week. I didn't act like it was a Rockies game. I wanted to make it more like a game of the week where I could find something interesting to talk about. So if I found it interesting, at least you'd feel my passion, and hopefully you'd stay tuned and listen. Because it was hard some of those days, because we didn't always have a great team. But nobody does. Remember this in baseball. Last thing for you, Bryce, promise. You win 100 games, you are deemed one of the great teams, not just that year, but one of the great teams in history. You win 100 games. In baseball, that means you lost 62 times. Think about that. How many times you walk away defeated. So that's why you never give up.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, let's give that a round of applause. That's a good one. Okay, last question.
So you mentioned earlier, you're talking about putting family first. How do you maintain a successful career and put family develops?
So our question is, you mentioned putting family first. How do you maintain a successful career while also balancing family as well?
Well, they took a back seat for a long time. And what Brian was referring to was an article in the Denver Post when I had to walk away from the game. It just was too much. I had a son who was having difficult times in high school here in Denver, actually in Castle Rock. We lived in Bell Mountain. My wife's here for the first time in our lives since we've been married. I'll be married 31 years in December. And that was the first time we were ever, oh yeah. She'll say it's because I was gone half the time, and that's probably true. But she lived in Bell Mountain with my 2 boys who gave her everything that she could handle in high school, especially the oldest. We had a difficult time with him. So here I am fathering him over the phone from New York City. I'm living in Manhattan by myself for 4 years, and it was difficult. So a lot of prayer, a lot of talking, and then one day on a subway I said, this has been a blessing to be in New York. You're supposed to be at the top of your game. The absolute ultimatum came down and said, go home. And I obeyed and I went home. And I've been happy ever since. And I will tell you that son is now 26 and he's awesome. And he gave me a grandson. Little Declan, I love him.
Let's give Wayne a round of applause.